Hi everyone, welcome to the bonus chapter Q&A with Katherine Arden. I hope you guys are just as excited as I am to get to speak to Katherine. In the meantime, whilst we're waiting, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask Katherine, please feel free to pop them either into the Discord or the Q&A function on the meeting, and I'll be sure to read them out to Katherine at some point in the Q&A. So get thinking about what sorts of questions you want to ask her. I can see in the Discord that we've got lots of excitement for tonight's event, which is really exciting. Lots of you have really enjoyed the Winternight series, and I'm really looking forward to getting to ask Katherine a lot about that series and, her writing process and everything. So that'll be very, very interesting.
I just turned it on. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes. Hello.
Hi everyone, how's it going?
Are you okay? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I've been on two different deadlines for a couple of weeks now, and I've been a little bit like just very in it. Um, but we're getting to the end of that period, which is great.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us through such a busy time of your life. We really
Oh,
appreciate
it's
it.
great to take a pause. Yeah, mostly I procrastinate by sweeping the floor or like weeding the garden, but talking is even better.
Yeah, hopefully this is maybe a bit more enjoyable than than doing
Definitely.
sweeping the floor.
Definitely.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming. My name is Charlotte, and I am a host for Chapter 25. And
Hi,
it's
Charlotte.
hello, it's really lovely to have you here today. We've got lots of people watching who are big fans. We've just been having a chat about how amazing your work is, and a lot of our book clubs have been reading The Bear and the Nightingale. So we're just really intrigued by that book and by the whole Winternight series, and we just wanted to ask you a few questions about that, but also about your kind of general writing process. And yeah, we've got a lot of questions from members as well, so it's really
Yeah,
great to have you here.
definitely. Bring them on. I hope I will make coherent sentences. We'll find out. Um, yes.
I've just been saying to the members that I feel like I probably won't, and I apologize in advance if I pronounce anything wrong, because I'm sure I will. I'm not the best at pronunciation.
Totally fine. The Russian names, it's not for all of us, I see.
I just feel like whenever I try and say them, it just doesn't sound right. And I've watched other people say it, and I'm like, but I can't get my head around it. I don't know what it is. It's just blocked.
I totally understandable, and I've heard it all, so it's not even a big deal.
That's good. Amazing. Um, Lovely. So I'd love to start asking you some questions about The Bear and the Nightingale, just because that is the book that a lot of our members have been reading and have really, really enjoyed. So correct me if I'm wrong, but this was your debut novel, wasn't it?
It was my first thing I ever wrote, actually. It was kind of a side project that I started after I graduated college, and it just ended up going a bit further than I expected it to. But yes, it was my first book, my first work.
That is incredible. How do you feel about that being your first piece of work and then it's done so well? It's a bestseller.
I mean, I think in some ways, maybe it's controversial. In some ways, I think your first book is hard because you're inexperienced, but it's also easier because there's no expectations. Expectations can be onerous for any kind of creative work, because for your first book, it's just creative. You're just, oh, I'm making up this thing for myself and my friends. But by the time you get to your second book or however many books, you're looking at deadlines and reader expectations and payment schedules and all these non-creative things that do weigh on a writer's life, and they can make it more complicated in some ways to just like get into a flow of creating. So I think writing your debut is obviously a challenge, but also kind of a gift, because it's the only book you'll ever write that was written with no expectations. And readers come to your first book with no expectations. After they've read your first book, they have they have sort of expectations of what kind of writer you are, what kind of things you do, what they expect you to do, what they might like from you. And for your first book, it's just like, I don't know, I'm just going to take it as it comes. And that's a gift too, I think. So I'm going to always be proud with Bear the Nightingale. It was, I read it in my early 20s, and it was one of those books that kind of was it kind of captures a moment in my life, which I love.
Yeah, you definitely should be proud. It's an incredible book, and that's really interesting because I've never really thought about that before. About how, yeah, that there isn't any expectations when it's your debut. Do you find that you kind of have pressure now that you've got a few books out?
I mean, I think there's expectations. And I think one of the biggest expectations that can actually weigh on a writer a lot is for your work to never be terrible. Um, Whereas the drafting process is a messy one, and often involves writing terrible sentences, paragraphs, whole chapters, whole sections of a book. And it can be easier to like get down and be like, oh no, like no one's gonna like this. But you have to remember that drafting's a process, right? And so your kind of initial raw sentences aren't usually what's going to end up as a book. And so learning to kind of set aside all the non-creative parts, like the expectations, also the schedules of a professional writing life, is something I've gotten better at over time. I think everyone feels it a little bit, but like it's easier to separate like the creative side and the writing side, and the business work sort of non-writing side.
Yeah, amazing.
The
So,
coherency and drafting. Oh God.
doing amazing. I'm just admiring like your bookshelf in the background. It's incredible. You've just got so many books. It's amazing.
I need to do a purge actually. They're starting to like overflow my giant bookshelf and become floor stacks. Or I could add more bookshelves. I think that's a better solution.
I have the same issue. There's literally just books everywhere and not enough room to store it, and it's just a problem. But will I get rid of the books? No.
I like getting rid of them. Like if I love them, I want to keep them, even if I've read them. I think I'll
I
just
know they're
add
like little trophies.
like the back wall is all books, and I'm thinking about adding like another, like sort of, this is my office, and sort of adding like another wall of bookshelves, which would make it almost like library status when there's two walls of books. So that'd be amazing.
Have every wall just of books.
It would be incredible. What is wanted?
I know, book lover's dream.
Right?
Amazing. So, with the Bear and the Nightingale, then,
Mhm.
there is so much to that story. And I know obviously that you've traveled quite a lot and you've moved around. And so I just wanted to know kind of what research did you have to do for this book, and where did the inspiration kind of come from for it?
So there, I'd actually lived in Moscow for 2 years when I started writing it. I did a year when I was 19, in Moscow, and then did a year again when I was in my, let's see, I was 22. And I studied Russian and as well as French and at uni. So I had this like background in language, history, all these things. And I'd always loved books based on fairy tales. But I loved Robin McKinley growing up, who was my favorite writer as a kid, and she wrote fairy tale retellings. But I'd never read a book that was based on a Russian fairy tale. And so that was kind of my starting point, like sort of fairy tale novel. And I sort of realized quickly that I didn't just want to do a book set in kind of like a Slavic flavored fantasy land. Because I felt like it was so easy to fall into cliche that way. And also for me, the world didn't feel grounded. It felt kind of like, it felt kind of vague. It was just me. And so I decided to set it in a historical period. And I'd never read a book set in sort of pre-Tsarist Russia. So during the sort of Mongol invasion era. And it was cool because it's a sort of an era with very few primary sources. So you have these big gaps in the record. So you could imagine sort of fantastical things happening to fill the gaps. And it felt like a really good place to marry sort of fairy tale and fact. And that was kind of the origin of The Bear and the Nightingale. But it's very much a trial and error process. Like in the first draft, there were like Vasya had like 7 siblings, and they all had, for some insane reason, they all had names that began with a V. And so I couldn't keep them straight. And I'm like writing along and realizing that I have no idea who her siblings are or what their even names are. And so did a big like purge of siblings at one point. Got it down to like characters who could be believed to have roles in the plot. And I remember when I first got started, I had to write dialogue for the first time. And I had this like moment of just like sheer panic thing, like, what would people say? Like genuinely being like, I have to make them say things. And having to kind of just go for it. So I think everyone's first book is a little bit of like an act of faith, right? A bit of trial and error. But I learned a lot writing it too.
And it clearly worked out amazingly, didn't it?
It was such a passion project. Like I loved the language, I love the history, I love the fairy tales. And a lot of that came out, I think, in the book. And I was really inspired by other fairy tale retellings. And I wanted to kind of remix different fairy tales that I loved in a new way. And so I had a lot of inspiration to draw from.
Yeah, amazing. I was talking to the members, and we're just so mesmerized by this book because your writing is so beautiful. And we were saying that there's so many, like, we've obviously read a lot of books. We're all big book fans and
Yeah,
obviously part of the book
me
club.
too.
And it's something like we've never read before. The writing is just, yeah, it's so unique. And you can really, and the setting is just beautiful, and that's just something that us as readers of your work really appreciate. So it's something that we kind of wanted to let you know about, really.
I mean, one of the we talked about debut, like writing a debut, I think one of the advantages too is that you have very few expectations about how a book is written. And so you kind of let yourself be creative, and it ends up with something that might be a little bit like unusual as far as like voice and pacing, just because you're very much, I don't know, just going for it. And it gives you that freedom to experiment a little bit. And I wanted, with the voice, I wanted it to feel sort of timeless and have like a fairy tale quality. So I use kind of this third person omniscient with like the different head hopping approach, but I didn't want it to be like sort of ye old, like fake, fake old timey English either. Like I wanted to feel sort of clean too. So there were some goals there in the writing with getting the voice right.
Well, the goals definitely worked. And it's really interesting as well because and please tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I read somewhere that you didn't really intend on being a writer from a young age. It's just something that kind of happened when you hit some inspiration. So I feel like that's really interesting.
I mean, I really loved to read as a kid, and I would make up stories to myself, but I never associated like loving books and loving reading and loving stories with a profession you could do and do it yourself. It was sort of I thought books kind of appeared in bookshelves, like magic. And I yeah, I did languages at uni. I wanted to be an interpreter. That was kind of my goal. And writing The Bear and the Nightingale was a little bit of a side project. Like I thought it'd be cool. At the time I had graduated, but I hadn't started grad school. I was living in Hawaii actually, and I was picking coffee on a farm, which is a very cool sort of post-college thing. It was pretty broke, but in Hawaii it's not bad to be broke. The coffee was great. But picking any kind of food is not very exciting. And so I started writing very much as a way to kind of pass the time, and discovered that I enjoyed doing it. And I think everyone who begins a novel thinks like, oh, what if I could publish this? Like wouldn't it be great if others enjoyed my book? And I delayed grad school and finished my manuscript, and sort of was fortunate that a publisher did want to publish it, and never went to grad school actually, because that was 8 books ago. But I think what ended up happening is I discovered that I enjoyed something, and that I could do it. And so those discoveries kind of sort of kept me doing it. I know several writers who didn't think of themselves as writers from a young age, or like dream of that. It was something they discovered later or came to sort of via other means. But the funny thing about this job is that you can have 10 different writers and they'll have 10 different stories about like how they were as kids, what they enjoyed, like how they came to this profession and how they kind of navigate it. So yeah.
That's so amazing, and it's really interesting to know that that is a process that you've kind of gone through. We have quite a few members who are aspiring writers, and we actually hold some like extra bonus chapters where there's like creative writing,
Mm.
and yeah, just basically different opportunities for our members to get writing, because we love reading books, and a lot of members do enjoy to write, and want to at some point maybe become a published author. Do you kind of have any advice for those members?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think my biggest single piece of advice is just finish the things you start. Because it's so easy to start a new idea, like you're all excited, like the opening scenes are going quickly, and eventually I think every book hits some kind of wall, like where you're not sure where it goes next, or where like the ending feels far, and you're just not in it enough, and it's really easy to kind of stop right then and not ever finish, and like be stuck with like 50 pages or 10,000 words or whatever. And it's so important to push through and finish what you begin. Even if you don't think it's good, even if it makes no sense, even if your first draft is like a dumpster fire, which can happen like easily. Like if it exists, it's fixable. If it doesn't exist, you can't fix it. And so it's really important to figure out how you write and just push through. Do you plan out with careful outlines? Do you just go? Are you some mix of the two? Like just getting experience of beginning something, taking it through to the end is, I think, just the most important thing. Because like the thing about writing novels professionally is you're expected to have an idea, present your idea, write your idea, finish your idea, and then edit it and turn it in for good, and then it's read by people. And being able to do that sort of over and over again, with like obviously some checks or false start, sure, but like just that kind of like I can produce work is an important skill.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that advice. That sounds super helpful, and I'm sure a lot of our members will love to take that advice on. With the Bear and the Nightingale, there is such like an interesting fan base around it, and I saw on your Instagram actually that there's lots of people who cosplay, which is just amazing. Have you
Yeah,
seen any particular cosplay that you've thought, oh, that's exactly how I've pictured that character?
I mean, I've seen beautiful fan arts and beautiful cosplays. Like, it's hard to know because like I don't think any single person will ever exactly match your own personal vision of somebody. But I think the magic of fiction and of cosplay and of fan arts is that you can see what other people saw when they were reading. And the great thing about books is that you can have 100 readers and they'll all have a different movie playing in their heads of this story. They'll all envision your main characters as different faces. They'll give them different voices. They'll give the scene different colors. Like it's such an interaction between the writer and the reader. And I just enjoy seeing interpretations of what I've done and how it kind of found itself in the brain of somebody else. It's a very beautiful thing, I think, writing, because it leaves so much the reader's own sort of mind, heart experiences.
Yeah, definitely. And so there's so many talented people out there that are doing these cosplays and these
That's
fan
great.
arts. I'm like, that is
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really
it's awesome.
lovely.
And that
Mm.
folks take the time, out of their lives to like, to like interact with your work in that way. It's really special, and you never get tired of it.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Um, so another question I wanted to ask you about the Bear and the Nightingale is um you handle some quite like challenging topics in there. How was that writing that for you? I mean, in particular, I'm just thinking about like your approach to writing about religion. I can imagine that being a very challenging aspect to kind of write about.
Well, it was funny because in school and at uni when I was doing Russian, there's sort of a concept in Russian historiography called dual faith, or Dvayeveria. It's like this idea that that paganism and Russian Orthodoxy can coexist, and they did coexist for a long time. The reason being that like you need to be Orthodox to go to heaven, but you need to be a pagan and embrace sort of pagan customs to survive on Earth. You need to like propitiate your household spirits and stuff. And I thought about that, and I was like, is it truly sort of possible for two faiths to coexist with zero friction ever for hundreds of years? And I was like, what if there were friction? Let's friction. And I wanted to kind of like put that in. It's really hard to write about historical Russia without thinking about religion, because religion sort of infused every aspect of life. It's like writing about medieval Europe, right? Like religion's everywhere. It's woven in the fabric of everyone's life in a way that's like the sort of the sun, the moon, the stars. And I wanted to have that kind of at the center of my book, instead of pretending like there wasn't, religion or religious conflict. There was that, and also just another kind of sort of factoid from history was just this existence of seclusion for women among the upper classes in medieval Russia, where women literally just lived in like a kind of a tower, like it was called a terem, like this sort of like secluded space. And that was just how it worked. And it was an interesting sort of historical moment because it seems very limited to Muscovy at the time. No one quite figured out what the sort of cultural bleed over is. It wasn't related to like the Ottoman practice of like harems. No one's quite sure like where it came from. Might have been like a sort of singular thing that came from the Mongol invasion to try to protect women from conquerors. Anyway, it just seemed, it was interesting to me because while you had this historical practice of seclusion, you also had fairy tales where women are so active and so interesting, especially compared to like European fairy tales, like sort of Sleeping Beauty, where she sleeps, Snow White, where she also sleeps, is more of a passive role. Whereas women in Russian fairy tales, like Vasilisa the Wise, Baba Yaga, like all these different people there's a lioness shapeshifter in one story that I loved, are very active, and she eats the hero and goes off laughing. And I asked myself sort of what would happen if a sort of fairy tale character with these fairy tale attributes found herself in a historical period. And kind of get at this disconnect a little bit. So that was another inspiration.
That's just amazing. And hearing you explain it like that is it just adds so much. And I do think, yeah, conflict is such an important thing in books. And the fact that, you made it so real is just, yeah, amazing.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about, like obviously we've read The Bear and the Nightingale, and quite a few members have gone on to complete the trilogy. I have not yet, but I'm so excited to because I read it quite recently actually, and I've really enjoyed it. But you've also got some books for younger readers that are a bit more on the scary side, and I was interested to know like how your writing process differs between writing the Winternight Trilogy and then writing your more scary books.
I mean, it's all just writing. I feel like the biggest is sort of consciously switching voices, like finding a different vocabulary, different sentence structure, a different rhythm to the prose is the biggest thing. And I make mistakes sometimes. My editor will be like, "Why is this word in here? Why is this? This is not a child word, Katherine." And I'll be like, "Oh, sorry." Like sorry, my dog, Moose. It's okay. Sorry, my dog is like next to me, like, what if we went out right now? And I'm like, buddy, what if we didn't go out right now? So yeah. So I guess it's like the shift in voice is the biggest thing. And in some ways it's easier writing for kids. They're shorter novels, right? I think it was 30,000 words versus like 120. But also sort of getting it right in those 30,000 words is hard too, like finding the right words, the right rhythm. It's kind of a different writing challenge in a way. But I don't think the process differs much. Like I have an idea, I'll write a few scenes out, I'll make like a sketchy outline, write some more scenes and kind of like put it together that way. And that works whether or not it's like a super long book or quite a short book.
Yeah, amazing. It's great that you have the kind of variety that you can write for different ages, and different genres as well. It's fantastic.
It keeps it exciting and interesting for me as a writer, trying to. I feel like some writers want to sort of branch out widely. Some writers want to sort of like stay in a space that is, you know, very much theirs. And I think both approaches are amazing, and you get amazing work from both. It's just kind of a different personality.
Yeah, definitely. Amazing. So now I thought we could move on to what the members are saying, because we've got lots of questions from them, and also just some really lovely comments that I thought I'd read out to you. So Gillian has said, I loved the trilogy. I was so excited when books 2 and 3 came out. I also really enjoyed The Warm Hands of Ghosts.
Yeah,
It's just a nice little comment there for you.
appreciate that.
So Anonymous has asked, I'd like to know what her writing process looks like, from where she finds her inspiration to researching the topic, and then what a writing day looks like. Is she a plotter or a pantser? Pantser? I actually don't know what that word is.
It just means somebody who doesn't plan their books.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's like flying by the seat of your pants, I think is where it comes from. But
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
it
You
is
learn
a
something new every
valid.
day.
So my editor told me on the phone last week that I have the weirdest writing process she's ever encountered in her like 40 years in the business. So that's great. Um, I I I outline some. I'm not outlines for me don't often work easily because I discover a lot of what makes my book kind of sing on the page. So I work from home. Usually I have an office in my house. Usually I'll get up and go out to my garden in the summer or go skiing in the winter, and then kind of get to my desk and start working mid-morning, and I'll do like sort of like 10 until 4 of either drafting or editing, or like there's also admin. A lot of writing is just like dealing with emails as well. I I outline a bit, and then do some scenes, outline some more. I write the worst drafts in the world. Usually I'll write 2 impossibly bad drafts, as in like drafts that make people who don't know just doubt my ability to write books. And my 3rd draft works out. So I very much have to discover the book as I write it. So don't be afraid of your just absolutely trash fire drafts. I speak from experience. And I've worked on outlining more, but it's just not something that comes naturally to me as a writer. So, you know, literally any process is valued, and it's weird. And yeah, it's kind of that. I usually take weekends off, unless I'm sort of on deadline or mid-edit, then I'll work through them. Yeah, done around 4 usually, unless again I'm editing. There's some days when you're just like working all day and all night. But yeah, you need to more specific process questions. It's hard to know exactly what the
I think you pretty much covered it, to be fair. It's really interesting hearing kind of because so many writers write in different ways. Some people have to just like really smash it all out in one go, or like plan it meticulously. So it's interesting to hear that you kind of find the book whilst you're writing it. So
I mean,
yeah.
of my 2 best writer friends, one writes 200-page outlines, and the other one has never planned a book in her life. So
yeah, it's just up to what's best for the writer, I guess.
the process is very variable.
Yeah. Amazing. So Stephanie has said, welcome, Katherine. It's lovely to hear from you. I loved the Bear and the Nightingale series and am enjoying The Warm Hands of Ghosts. What is it about that junction of historical and cultural fantasy that appeals so much to you as an author?
Oh, I really enjoyed Hisfic when I was growing up. I enjoy it now. I like fantasy too. I like the sort of intersection where you can see the real world, but it takes in the sort of mythic or like magical tone or vibe. It's sort of the writing space that makes me most believe in magic in the real world. And it kind of marries my enjoyment of myth, my enjoyment of history, my love of fantasy. Like it's kind of the sort of sweet spot of my interests. And I love finding sort of little places in history where you feel like magic could happen or could exist, and sort of justifying it to yourself. And read somewhere that like historical fiction was kind of the first fantasy because both genres involve inventing a world you've never seen, and imagining that world. And it's really fun to like try to transport someone elsewhere and make them believe in a different world. And I'd love to write like a full-on like sort of fantasy, a second world fantasy that has its own world, its own rules. But I also enjoy history a lot. So my next book for adults is set during the Renaissance. So it's another historical fantasy.
Oh, amazing. How exciting.
Mm.
Amazing. Thank you. So before I ask Pretty's question, I'm just going to ask myself the kind of like the female protagonist of the Brown Nightingale. How
Mm-hmm.
do you say her name?
Vasilisa.
Vasilisa.
Uh-huh.
Okay, lovely. I
Vassila.
thought it was something like that, and I was like, I don't want to
Mhm.
get it wrong. So, because she's because Pretty is asking about Vasilisa and how she came about and developed into the character. She also said, looking forward to reading the next two in the cooler months.
Yes, they're good winter books. Um, I mean, she was inspired by fairy tales. Like, there's a lot of Vasilisas in Russian fairy tales. There's a Vasilisa the Wise. There's a Vasilisa the Beautiful in different stories. It's a beautiful name. It's a fairy tale name, and she very much grew on the page. Like, she was a person that kind of developed from like plot point to plot point. Her personality grew as her story grew. And she in some ways she sort of encapsulates like where I was in my early 20s. Like I was somebody who was kind of wandering, very restless, trying to figure out who I was and my place in the world, and that kind of echoed in Vasya a little bit. But at the same time, she's somebody that's, you know, very different from me. And I kind of just got to know her as I wrote her. Her original inspiration was when I was living in Hawaii, the people on the farm next to us were actually from Ukraine, but they were ethnically Russian, and they had a kid named Vasily. So she was 5 years old, and she was a very cool kid. She had these big green eyes, and she would chase chickens all day and like yell at them in Russian. And I love that kid. She was so brave, like she was so fearless, and I wanted to bring some of that like just energy to Vasya as well.
That's so lovely. I wonder if she's like, well, what, she was 5, so it'd be amazing if she could like grow up and really read the books. It'd be
I don't
probably really
know. I
lovely for
really
her.
haven't talked to her in 10 years, but she's been an adult now or close. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Thank you. Um, so Anonymous has said, "Hi Catherine, I did Russian history at uni, so loved this trilogy so much. Completely agree that there's barely any fiction out there that is set pre-Tsarist Russia. Religion is one of the key themes throughout the books. What made you decide to go down the route of Christianity versus the old Russian?" And I've got no idea how you say that word.
Um, uh, I don't. I I kind of mentioned I touched on this a little bit earlier. Just this idea of dual faith as a real concept in history, and sort of wondering how that might have played out in real time on the ground. I also enjoyed pulling in like historical figures. Saint Sergei is a big one. He's an actual Orthodox saint. I pulled him in. Also, Vasya's brother is an historical character, although don't Google him because you'll be spoiled for the books. But yeah, I don't know. I just, like I said, I wanted religion was a central factor in a lot of people's lives back then. I wanted to honor that and not just kind of push to the side.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. We've got one more question here, then we'll move on to the Discord questions. So Sam has said, "Thank you for coming on and sharing your stories with the world. It's such a privilege to be here. Did you realize how much this series would be loved? I feel like I stepped into Vasilisa's world when I read your books and enjoyed them so much."
Thank you. No, I had no idea. I think, it's funny. I feel like the the world in 2025 is a world where we're almost like perceived too much. Like it's this world where everyone's kind of always watching. And to be a writer, at least for me, it's important not to think about what people will think about what you're doing. I think it'd be very paralyzing to think about like someone's going to read this sentence or read these words or read this plot point. It's hard to function, I think, in that space of thinking about an audience. At least for me, I think everyone's different. And so I wrote the Winternight books and still write sort of to please myself, to things that I would have enjoyed when I was younger that I enjoy now. And sort of hope that things that please me will please others. But I feel like if you start getting in this place of like, what do people like? I will write that. I think it comes, at least for me, from a less honest place, and from a place that's less interesting. Honestly, when you're doing a book, you're with this work for at least a year, unless you're extremely fast. And I feel like having to live with an idea, a setting, a space for a year, you have to like it. You have to enjoy it. You have to be like, this is interesting to me. Otherwise, you're just frustrated all the time. And so, it's almost this weird experience, step back from having written a book to seeing how people perceive your book. And it's been, a massive sort of honor and sort of joy to see people loving and responding to the Winternight books. But no, had no idea. I was excited to be published, as many of us are, and had plans to go to grad school if my book thing didn't work out. that was kind of it. Yeah.
That must have been such like a lovely surprise then when it was really hitting it off.
I mean, it was like, it's funny when you're a debut novelist, nobody tells you anything. And so I didn't really know it was hitting off until later. I think in part because it was one of those books that doesn't really become a bestseller. It's just a book that just kind of had a life of its own, had like readers who loved it and found it, but it built slowly over time. And when you're sort of like, you think like, oh, success means like hitting all the lists or a movie, but this kind of slow, organic connection with readers over time was something that I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Wow, but you don't think of it as like, oh my gosh, yay, I won. It's sort of slower and almost more surprising in some ways, just seeing your books sort of live in the world sort of outside of you.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Lovely. So we've already talked quite a bit about what's kind of inspired you writing the Winternight series, but Sam has put quite a lot in the chat that it's her favorite books ever, her favorite series. So I just kind of wanted to
appreciate
that little bit of a shout out.
Yes.
Beth has said that she's got 2 questions, so I'll start with the first one. How did you balance historical realism with the fantasy/fairy tale elements of the final battle?
Ooh, in the final battle in particular, I mean, I don't know. I had the historical plotline converging and my own character's plotlines converging, and it was very much a moment by moment kind of like traffic directing, like trying to make all the pieces work and fit together in a way that made somewhat sense to people and kind of honored the history and honored the fantasy without being sort of unbelievable in either sense. And the battle already had these big kind of like swings. The guy he like betrayed the Mongols and ended up inside of the Russians. Like that was real. But nobody knows why. Oh, maybe it's my character that did it. Like stuff like that. It's fun trying to fit your own explanations or your own fantasy into the history. But I think the end of every book, if you've written it well, is a little bit of like it's like a boulder going downhill. Like you've built these pieces and they have to run now. And if the ending's not sort of rolling by then, you sort of made a mistake higher up the hill with your writing. And I think that goes doubly true for the end of a series, where you've hopefully built kind of your ramp over the course of a couple of books. And so by the end of the 3rd book, it's really kind of just like zooming downhill and it feels like it comes together in a more or less natural way. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that analogy of like the boulder and the hill. That's a really good analogy. I like that. Amazing. So, Beth's other question was there any particular experience that drew you into studying Russian, and then writing about the folklore?
Yeah, it's actually really funny. My younger brother was into ballroom dancing of all things when he was a kid, which unusual for a boy. But his partner was Russian, this girl named Sasha, and they had just moved from Moscow for her dad's work, and she didn't speak much English at the time, and I ended up like being her tutor, like helping her with her homework every day, and like I super kind of bonded with this family. They were great people, and they ended up inviting me to go to Russia with them at the end of sort of their first year in the States. And I spent a summer in Moscow, and I loved it. This was summer of '06, so kind of different era for sure. And I ended up going back to study Russian, and just yeah, that was the inspiration. I just got so interested, and later on, I had a friend whose parents worked for the UN, and they were interpreters, and they did French, Russian, English, which is my language triad too, and I thought it'd be a cool job, so I was like pursuing that as a career, and kind of the writing was like a bit of a detour that ended up being the track.
It was a good detour to take.
It worked out. It worked out.
Amazing. Yeah, we've kind of touched on this already, but Agatha has asked, I wonder what the research process looked like in terms of the folklore. So did you know quite a bit about like Russian folklore beforehand, or did you have to do quite a lot of research into it?
I knew a lot of folklore. I'd read like I read Pushkin, I read fairy tales. It was actually how I started to learn Russian, as I was reading fairy tales aloud. Especially if you read Pushkin aloud, it's written in it's in pentameter. And so the pentameter helps you know which word to stress, like which syllable to stress in a line, which helps you learn words. And so I might have let my dog out. He is still unhappy. So I'm going to have to vanish for 5 minutes. And I'm
Oh,
so
no
sorry.
worries.
But
It's
he's
absolutely
home with me.
fine.
And I hate hearing him unhappy. So I will finish this question and then just quickly let him out.
Yeah, no
And then
problem.
I promise.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we'll see, Russian fairy tales. So I kind of had this base of history, and I had this base of folklore, but I did a lot of particular research for the books too. I read, kind of archives like JSTOR stuff, um, books. I had a really good book called The Bathhouse at Midnight, which was like a sort of an overview of like magical beliefs in medieval Russia. That was really helpful. I had a book on just like sort of folklore and folk beliefs that I really loved. It's called Russian Folk Belief by Linda Ivanitz. I had a really good library of books that I consulted that really helped too. I'll
Amazing.
be back in like 1 minute. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
no, don't worry. Don't worry.
Oh, Spud, come on. Hello, I'm so sorry.
No, please don't worry. Honestly, we don't want any sad dogs.
He was screaming and he was screaming in outrage.
Oh.
Although he didn't have to pee, he wanted to go lie in the driveway. I'm mildly enraged about. But because he was like
Oh.
howling, he was like making these sad sounds, and I was like, oh no. He's like, no, he just wanted to go outside.
Dogs are funny.
Dogs, man. Okay.
Yeah, please don't worry. Amazing. So we've got a couple of questions from Holly, which I'll probably summarize a little bit because she's clearly very excited to ask these questions and is just basically quoting loads of amazing quotes from your book because they're just so amazing. But Holly has said, what was your writing process for coming up with such sensory evoking descriptions in the Winternight Trilogy? And then she basically goes on to show lots of different quotes that are just absolutely amazing. And said the way you capture the words that you will know will register sensations in the reader. How did you know or work out which to pair with what? Quite a hard question.
Boy, I feel like it's not really a conscious process. I love a good description. I feel like the best descriptions are sort of succinct, like they evoke the one image and then keep going. And so I think part of it is knowing when to describe and when to cool it a little bit with the descriptions. I do think one evocative word or one evocative image can sort of be like a shorthand for the whole space, and it can be sort of easier to process that than just like going on, you know, with a lot of words. I also try and use figurative language that's rooted in the world itself. So it's important to think about modern vocabulary, also modern like figurative language. Like a lot of English is based on like boats. A lot of our figurative language is boat metaphors. And so I was kind of wary, like there's so many words, like taken aback is a boat thing. Um, at loggerheads, a boat thing. Like there's all these kind of ship language that I would try to keep out, along with like things like she felt a jolt, right? Jolt electricity is like not part of this world. And so you're trying to like find a vocabulary that is related to what these characters are and what they're experiencing. And a lot of it's just like, this sounds good, it makes sense, let's go. So it's a little bit of an instinctive process of like finding a rhythm in the paragraph that sounds good to the ear and uses the word that I want. I love words. I do love words and like finding the right word. I love a good obscure word, if it's not too kind of like ostentatious. And just enjoying language, I think really helped me like find a rhythm and a kind of a music to it that I liked for myself and hope others would like too.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Holly has also asked, in the Winternight Trilogy, what made you decide to avoid using contradictions? She found it slowed the pace in a way that made every word matter. Was this intentional?
I don't think so. I think I just kind of wrote it. Like you know, it's funny because you find things after the fact that are cool and were, you know, kind of embedded in the text all along, but you weren't consciously like, oh, I'm gonna do this. A lot of the slow pace is just my inexperience as a writer. Because I'm sort of building this world very slowly, because I wasn't in this game of like pace, pace, pace. And I do think there's a lot of pressure, especially in sort of modern fiction, to have pace. And I didn't really expect publication, so I was just like, I'm just gonna write the story out. And as far as like the contractions go, contractions give modern English. So I say cannot instead of can't. And it just adds like a better rhythm to me. You know, like you want to do is kind of give a timeless feel, it's almost like a formality to the language without actively being like sort of stuffy. Was an interesting phase in the development of modern fiction, or modern fantasy rather, where people were writing kind of pseudo-Arthurian texts and languages. There's a novel that was sort of published in the late 19th century. It's called The Well at the World's End, which is a favorite of Tolkien, a favorite of C.S. Lewis. And it was written in this like kind of hard to read, sort of fake Arthurian language. You know, like sort of Provi, Syrah kind of stuff. And it's I think it's a little awkward to the modern ear, frankly. So you want to find a way that feels readable, but also has that kind of slowness and that kind of like density that I think older books do have.
Amazing, thank you. Um, she's also asked one thing that stood out to her in the third part of The Bear and the Nightingale was that in Constantine's room stops being referred to as a room, and for 2 or 3 instances becomes a cell. After his inner conflict reaches a peak. Was this intentional? If so, it really struck with her as a powerful metaphor for his character's journey.
I mean, that was intentional, and you often refer to like anchorites have being in a cell, like a priest cell, like it kind of worked. And also it's a character whose state of mind's an interesting one. By then, he was very much trapped in his own sort of self-love and self-loathing. He's a person who's always kind of seen himself in this kind of like fun house way all around him, and it's very limiting for him, as I think probably everyone noticed. Yeah, he was a fun character to tackle, just because of all of his internal contradictions.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. And then Holly has asked on page 313, very specific, of The Bear and the Nightingale, Anna says, the men are ready and a woman to see your virtue. What does this mean? At the time, she took it to mean that a woman must accompany a group of men plus one woman, making it 2 women, so that the men wouldn't rape or assault the singular woman. But then at the book club meeting, someone suggested that it might be to ensure that Vasilisa doesn't choose to be sexual with any of the men. So I think she, just kind of wants clarity around that.
I was calling
Line.
it with the sense of like chaperone. I think whatever chaperones do, right? So everyone knows like she hasn't been with somebody, whether voluntary or not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
chaperone. It's hard to, if you can't, chaperone.
Yeah.
But
No,
like,
I think that
but
summarizes
again,
it.
chaperone's like a word that is so that like you get from like Regency romance, right? It's like a word that doesn't really work in this medieval space, and so you don't say it. You use different kind of circumlocution to like say the same thing. But to me, it was important to not use words that were so very obviously rooted in a different time.
Yeah. Amazing. Sam has asked, can you share what you're working on at the moment and when your next release is planned?
Yes, I definitely can at this point. I'm in sort of final edits for a new book. I don't think we haven't done a title announcement yet, so I'm going to sort of hold off until we do an official announcement. But it is set during the early French Renaissance in Brittany, and it should be out in June of next year. That's pretty sure at this point. So, it's been a great book to work on. I've enjoyed it a lot. So it's based on the history of France and of Brittany, and also on Breton folklore. So yes.
Amazing, how exciting. Was that a stack of paper? There was a big stack of paper on your Instagram. Was that?
Yes, it's quite a sort of large. It's funny. My first draft was really long, but this draft is about as long as Winter of the Witch. So it's like kind of in that kind of 120 range for the book. And then I'm also doing a book for children. It's also hopefully out next year. We'll see. It's a little more questionable. But yes, I have 2 projects kind of in kind of late process now.
Very busy.
It's gonna be busy. I had this sort of dream of like getting it all done before the summer ended, so I could like just lounge for a week, but it has not happened. So I am gonna work through until the fall probably. But that's okay. I'm excited to share new work.
We're excited to read it. Holly has asked, do you set out in all your writing projects to bring a focus to misogyny and to create a space where women can break free of oppression? If so, why do you think it's important, and who is your ideal audience in this case?
I think not per se, only because I think it's a little bit dangerous to start writing a story with a moral goal. I think the story should sort of speak for itself. You shouldn't be trying to like sort of message via storytelling. I mean, there's fantastic books that do and have, but I didn't sort of start out that way with The Bear and the Nightingale. What I noticed was just this disconnect between like this practice of women secluding women in medieval Muscovy and the richness and freedom of the fairy tale literature. And I wanted to explore that particular and specific contradiction. And I think doing that does get at kind of this more universal experience of like misogyny. But you know, it's hard. You have to be careful too, because the idea of women's rights has no sort of even linguistic place in medieval Muscovy. There's no sort of concept for it, and so you're trying to present a world that feels authentic or real, while also kind of exploring the space that's kind of a more modern sort of notion of what women are owed, what they should be doing. Yeah, I don't know. I think, and it's, I guess, my other book that does a little bit as Warm Hands of Ghosts, which is set during the First World War, and it has its main character is a combat nurse from Canada. And, you know, one of the inspirations for that was just, I read a bunch of sort of work about the war. There's tons and tons of memoir, of nonfiction. And one thing I noticed was how kind of the young volunteer nurses, who are often middle class or upper class, were kind of lionized and sort of applauded for their, you know, bravery, generosity, whatever. But the professional nurses, the working women, who were actually working class women who had been trained before the war, were kind of looked down on. And this tone sort of I noticed over and over again in my reading on the time period. It's because, of course, like, women who worked were kind of looked down on, even if their vocation sort of saved lives. And I didn't love that, and I wanted to tell a story from the perspective of like a sort of professional nurse, not just somebody who kind of was 18 and volunteered, but who knew what she was doing and had chosen the vocation, not because she wanted to like do her bit, but because she was actually a professional. And yeah, so I guess maybe I do to an extent explore like the situations of women in history, but it always starts from something specific in that time period, not just like a general need to like sort of support an agenda, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Amazing. Agatha has asked, did you know, more or less at least, what the whole story arc would be across the trilogy, and did the story take any unexpected turns while you were writing?
I did not know. I knew where I wanted it to end. And I had my beginning, but when I submitted my first draft to my first agent, like my agent back in the day, and we sold it, that one of the sort of like requests during that sale was that I would take my existing manuscript and cut it in half and discard the second half and rewrite the first half, which I did. And so The Bear and the Nightingale is the first half of my original book. And the second half, like, improbable things happened. Like, she met the Amazons. Like, it was a little weird. And originally, back in the day, I sort of assumed that I would just use my discarded second half of The Bear and the Nightingale as my second book in Winternight. But it didn't work. I tried for months, and like, it just wasn't very good. And you know, I was like, it's not very good to my editor, and she's like, yeah, so I kind of asked you to drop the yes, yeah. So that was exciting. I was, you know, when you're a baby author, like, everything feels more intense. You're like, how did I do this? And so I had to go back at that point and rethink how I wanted to get my characters from Bear to the end. And it very much evolved on the page. In the first draft of the last book, there's kind of a big plot twist towards the end that just didn't happen. And the ending was very flat. And I had about a week left on my deadline, and I knew the ending wasn't working, and I had this idea late in the game to fix it. And I was in London actually on tour for the last book, and I got an Airbnb, and my editor then just sent me a box of cupcakes, and I got some orange juice so I wouldn't get scurvy, and I just sat in this basement Airbnb for a week and like pounded out the new ending, and turned it in at 4 a.m. on the very last day, and ended up being like kind of a thing that kind of made the book, the entire series, work. And I think that Airbnb host was very patient with the maniac in her basement, but it did end up being kind of, it worked at the very end, but it was something that was very much came to me over time. So.
Yeah, amazing. I'm very aware that we're at 9 o'clock, so this may need to be our last question. But a couple of people, I know Agatha has and Shelby has asked, what books are you currently reading?
Oh man, let's see. What did I read recently? I'm always like, I always have like a list in my head, and then somebody asks, and I'm like, oh, do I read? I recently really enjoyed The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, which is a wonderful historical horror about Native American man becomes a vampire, and it's just an incredible like exploration of the American West and the sort of tortured history of its indigenous population, and sort of an exploration of vampirism as like it's almost like a time travel thing, like as you move from past to future. And I loved it, and it was great. My husband and I just watched the Murderbot TV show, so I finally picked up the Murderbot Diaries and read those recently, which was great too. Let's see, what else have I read recently? I wrote about Empire of Ice and Stone, which is a wonderful nonfiction about the Arctic. And this one, like Arctic expedition, was really good. I also just recently read All the White Spaces, which is a Arctic horror. I feel like I kind of bounce around as far as like what I've been reading. I tried some Louis L'Amour recently, didn't like it. But I wanted to try because I do love historical, and my dad loves Louis L'Amour, so that was kind of fun. I recently read Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman because again my dad loved him. My dad's a huge reader. And that was pretty fun. I'd never read any lit RPG before, so that was kind of cool. So yeah, I read all over. I like books. I pick whatever up is kind of in front of me up and read it. So yeah.
Amazing. And now we all have so many more books to add to our TBRs.
I love kind of changing genres. It's fun.
Yeah, definitely. One super quick question from Zoe, just because I have to ask, what kind of dog is Moose?
Oh, he is half Plot Hound, which is a sort of German hound breed from North Carolina. He's half Pit Bull. So he's a rescue.
Wow.
He's got little stripes. He's all over my Instagram, so you can see him. But he's great. He's a wonderful dog. He's so sweet and so smart, and sometimes an idiot. But that's dogs. And yes, he's a very good boy. He just sometimes wants to go outside when I'm on a call.
Oh, bless him. Well, maybe he can have his time now.
Yes, right. All right, finally, you got it. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Katherine, for answering the many questions that we've had for you. It's been really, really lovely to chat to you. And, thanks to our members as well for asking so many amazing questions. It's just been a really lovely night. And we wish you all the best for your future work, and can't wait to read it.
Yeah, there should be announcements soon for new work, which I'm excited about. And I hope you'll have a wonderful evening, and thank you for your patience with me. There will be books out of it, so hopefully it's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're so excited to read them. And yeah, thank you so much. It's been lovely to chat to you.
Great, thank you guys. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.